Assalamu alaikum everybody. Today I'm going to teach you the entirety of Camera 3D and the 3D workspace in After Effects in general. I'm going to share with you all the knowledge I have regarding this subject that has led me to creating effects like these. So without wasting any more time, let's dive in. Okay, so to learn Camera 3D, we're of course gonna need a camera. So I'm gonna add a camera. Okay, so now here, when you go to preset, there's gonna be a lot of lenses. I'm gonna tell you what each lens does. Not each lens, but I'm gonna tell you the basic concept of the lenses. So for example, the lower numbers of millimeters in the lens is going to result in a more distorted image, just like I showed you with the text. When I rotate it, it's more distorted, and when the camera lens is at a higher numbers of millimeters, the image is flatter. I'm not a camera geek. I haven't used a camera in real life before, so I don't really know the difference and I can't go into details about this, but it doesn't matter that much. So you can just probably go and use a 50mm camera. That's what I use. I've made a preset for myself with a 50mm lens, and then I've changed some settings here to suit my lightings. You can play around with these lenses. It's not a big deal. That's what I know about these, and that's what I use them for. I mean, I don't really switch millimeters. And once we have our camera on the timeline, all right, so first thing first, whenever you add something on the timeline and you want it to be affected by the camera 3D, you are gonna basically probably know this already. You're gonna have to enable 3D on the layer, so it is affected by the camera. As you can see, as soon as I enable it, it zooms in because it is now taking effect of the camera. So the first thing I'll tell you about is the viewport or the view layout. When you are working with multiple objects and multiple effects on the screen, you will have to use this. It's gonna make the workflow a lot easier and make you understand things a lot easier. So we are gonna go to two views. Now we have multiple screens. We are gonna leave the screen on the left to be as it is, and we are gonna play around with the screen on the right to move things around and to look at things from different angles. So first thing we're gonna wanna do is click on the right screen. If it's on the left, they're gonna be corners or edges or whatever you want to call them. It's gonna be highlighted like this. So what we have to do is select the screen on the right and go to this drop down 3D view pop-up. Make sure it's on custom view 1, either 2 or either 3. It doesn't matter. It should be on either 3 of these. You can definitely use those, but I'm gonna tell you the use of these later in the video. So firstly, we're gonna click one of these, and now as you can see, we are looking at things from a different perspective. Now I'm gonna tell you about two tools from here that can help you move around in this workspace. So the first tool is this. You can either press 1 on your keyboard or shift plus 1 on your keyboard. These are the three sub tools of the tool that I just showed you guys. This only allows you to move horizontally. This allows you to move vertically, and if I try to move horizontally, I cannot do that. This tool lets you move in a 360 degrees of free motion. You can do whatever you want with this. So that's the first tool, and that's to orbit around the center point of the screen. So if I were to be here, it's still gonna orbit around the center of the screen. So that's where our second tool comes in. To take this out, you're gonna have to press 2 on your keyboard, or just like the other tool, you can press shift 2 and then press that again to toggle between the other modes. What this allows you to do is it lets you move across the screen or pan across the screen like this. So if I were to change the rotation something to, let's say, something like this, and now I'm going to take out my other tool, I'm going to press 2 on my keyboard. Now I can move up and down, left and right, diagonally, or however you want to move it. So it's basically to pan around, and the other tool is to orbit around. These are the two key tools we are going to use, and that's going to help you a lot throughout this video, so keep those in mind. Now we are going to move on to our third and last tool to move around in the second viewport. I don't really use this tool, but it's really helpful as well, and you will need it in the near future. So the first two were to orbit and pan around the screen, and the third one is to zoom around the workspace. Let's say I'm looking on the screen like this, and I want to zoom in onto the text that I just wrote. I can do that, but that's not really zooming in. I'm just zooming in the entire viewport, and that's a different thing. So to set that, let's say if you have accidentally zoomed into the viewport, to fix that, you're gonna have to be sure that you have selected the right viewport, and then you're gonna click to fit up to 100%, and it's gonna center back up. Now to truly zoom into the text, you're gonna have to press 3, or this tool, the dolly towards cursor. You can press 3, and we're gonna click and move our mouse up or down to zoom into the camera. As you can see, it's zooming into the text, and since we are on custom view, it's not gonna mess up any properties of the camera. So that's why you have to make sure that you have selected either three of these if you want to move around, because if you're on active camera and you make a mistake and you move something like this, you're gonna make changes on the camera and you don't want to do that. Right, that's for the tools and the workspace. Now we're gonna move on to how the camera works and how you can set up your timeline to work with the 3D camera. Also, I forgot to mention one more thing. If you want to reset the custom view back to its default, you can click here and it will reset the viewport. There are multiple ways of setting up the camera. So the correct way of using Camera 3D, or the way I think is correct, is adding a null layer. Once you have a null layer parented to your camera, you can add as many null layers and just keep on stacking them up. For example, if I want to add another null layer and make sure that it is part of the entire thing, what I can do is take the first null layer that I created and parent that to the newer null layer. So if I make changes to this, it's also going to take effect on the camera. And if I still make changes, and if I want to change something on the older movements, I can do that, and it's also going to be part of the movement of the camera. So that's how you can set up the camera on your timeline. So now we're gonna talk about the main part, the 3D workspace, like how to set up things and how things move differently when it's 3D. So once you have enabled 3D on a layer, you're gonna notice that you have a whole new value. You have a whole new value right there, besides the position X and position Y. What this means basically is the distance between the camera. So to understand that better, we are gonna look at it from a perspective. Let's think that this is you, that you are the camera, okay? This is me standing right there, or you standing right there, and this is a person. This value determines the distance between you and the person. So for example, the higher the value, the further away the person or the object is from you, and the lower the value, the closer the person gets or the closer the object gets. And it can also go up to a point where the value gets a negative, and it's at a point where the object goes beyond you. For example, like this. Now as you can see, the text or the object has gone beyond me or the camera, because that's me for now. So it has gone beyond me, and I can no longer see that on my timeline, because it all makes sense, right? So that's how the third value on the position works. Right now, I'm gonna add multiple texts on the screen and position them differently on different distances, and then I'm gonna tell you how to pan the camera or move the camera across the screen. So I've created multiple different texts on my screen, and I'm gonna place all of them across the screen in different positioning in different directions. Also, whenever you want to rotate a 3D object, as soon as you turn on the 3D icon, you will see that there are 4 values now instead of one rotation, the one simple rotation, because now you can rotate it in the 3D space as well. You can flip it vertically, you can flip it horizontally, and now we also have a value called orientation. You do not want to mess around with this. Do not touch this. Just don't do anything with this. Trust me, it's gonna mess up your stuff and you won't even understand what to do to fix it. I'll just recommend you to leave it as it is and use these 3 values, these 3 individual values, to do whatever you want. Okay. So for now, to see things better, I'm gonna hit full screen and close the other viewport so we can see things better. Now I have my different text layers scattered across the screen, and to move across, like I had said, I'm gonna add a null layer, make sure it's 3D, and parent the camera to it, parent the camera layer to the null layer, and now I'm gonna hit P on the keyboard. It's gonna bring up the position values. I'm gonna hit keyframe. All right, let's change things up a bit. I'm gonna put this one, or the text that says camera, I'm gonna put that to the center, and to do that, I'm gonna just hit the shortcuts that I have on my keyboard, and it's gonna send it way back. I'm gonna bring it back closer to me, something like this. I'll tell you what I did on the keyboard later. Alright, so I'm gonna make sure that the word camera is close to the camera itself and it's centered. Now we're gonna hit P on the keyboard, bring up the position keyframes. I'm gonna go 30 frames forward. You know what? I'm gonna go 40 frames forward. And now I'm gonna go to the word. I'm gonna pan across the screen to the word visuals. Okay. I'm gonna zoom in. So as you can see, I am moving the camera forward, or I'm bringing the camera forward so it goes beyond the word camera like this. I'm gonna bring up the second viewport so you can see things better. As you can see, as I move the camera forward, the word comes closer to me, the word camera comes closer to me, and if I go beyond it, it's gonna disappear. Now I'm gonna pan to the left and go up, so I have the word visuals centered in the screen. Now as you can see, if I move back to the previous keyframe, you can see I am moving the camera from first word to the other word. Now I am gonna create another null layer in order to overlap the keyframes, because you never want to continue moving. Like for example, let's say I could have added another movement like this, something like this, on the same layer, right? I could have done that. Now let's say if I easy ease or if I add a graph to my keyframes, it's gonna look so boring. It's gonna be so jarring. It's so stale. It's so, I don't know, so bad. It's like really slow. It stops for a bit and then it continues. You don't want that. You want the keyframes, you want the second motion to start before the first one has ended in order to achieve the smooth movements. So for that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut this null layer here where the keyframe ends. I'm gonna create another one and I'm gonna go 20 frames forward. 20 frames backwards. So I'm in the middle of this one, because as you might remember, this was 40 frames long, so I went 20 frames backwards. It's a bit quick math right here. And I'm gonna go 40 frames forward. So as you can see, it literally cuts the first null layer in half, and it's gonna start the second motion before we have reached the midpoint for the first one. So we're gonna hit B, make sure it's the camera is enabled. Okay, so one thing you wanna keep in mind, and that's really an important step, is you want to make sure that when you are parenting your first null layer to the second null layer, I don't know how to explain it. It's a bit like a nerdy thing that I figured out the hard way, and you don't want to do that. So just listen to my advice. Just take my advice, take my word for it, and you will be fine. Just take my word for it. Move forwards, parent the null layers, and now I'm gonna add positioning. I'm gonna add keyframes. I'm gonna make sure I center the word honey now. It doesn't have to be perfectly in the center. I'm just trying to explain you guys how it works. So now if I easy ease the keyframes, as you can see, it's way more smoother now, and the word visuals, it's definitely not gonna be dead in the center, because we are starting another transition before that even ends, so it's not gonna be able to reach to its final destination. And if you want to fix that, what you can do is move that a bit forwards. It's still gonna be smooth because the other transition is starting before the first one ends, but you can let it go a bit further so it reaches its desired destination. I'm gonna add another null layer. Let's go 15 frames forward like we did for this, so we let the first animation play out a bit more. As you might be noticing that the movement is a bit weird, that's because the rotation, as you can see, it's based upon the anchor point, and the anchor point of the null layer is all the way right there. Basically the null layer, then the entirety of the null layer is all the way right there, and you don't want that to happen, and I'm gonna tell you how to fix that later on the video. We're gonna add the easing. I added another null layer, same steps, enable 3D. And add the easing. That's how it's gonna look. Oops. Right, this can happen to you. I'm gonna explain what happened. It's when you misclick, and I was moving the position keyframes, right? And I accidentally selected both of the keyframes, and I also moved the first keyframe with this one. What that did is it fucked up the entire movement of the thing. So I'm gonna reset it. So what you have to do is go to the first one and reset it, and simply click reset. So it resets back to default and it doesn't mess up the entire movement. Now I'm gonna add the easing back in. if you want to make the movements faster, you can definitely bring them closer to each other so they start overlapping more and make the movement a bit more smoother. That is how you achieve smooth movements like you see on Twitter, on YouTube, and all the other big editors do. And I hope this gives you an idea of how the 3D space works and how the distancing of each object looks like and how it works. And we haven't even jumped into the depth of field yet. That's the next thing that I'm going to teach you. Right, so for the depth of field, to make sure that it's enabled, we're going to hit the drop down on the camera, go to camera options, and as you can see here, depth of field is turned off. So I'm going to enable it. So by default, how it's going to look like is when any object gets closer to the camera, it's going to get blurrier. It really just depends on the focus distance, by the way. As you can see, we have the word camera in front of our actual camera, and we want that to be in focus for the first part and not be out of sight. We're gonna bring up the second viewport, and we're gonna go to left, and that's where these come in handy. So when you click left, you can see a overall view from the left side of things, and you can see these are our text. That's the word camera over there, as you can see. Now I'm gonna bring the focus distance closer. You have to make sure anything you want to be in focus, you have to bring the focus distance all the way over to that object. So for now, I want the word camera to be in focus. I'm gonna bring the focus distance, which is this. As you can see, it moves when I move this. I'm gonna bring this all the way over to the word camera, as you can see here. All right, so now the word camera is in focus and all the other words have gone out of sight. So for the blur, how you can change the quality of the blur and how the blur looks and the amount of blur, I'm gonna go to the iris shape, change it from fast rectangle to heptagon. It basically increases the quality of the blur, and to decrease the amount of blur, I'm gonna turn on the aperture like this, so it changes the amount of blur you have on the objects. So now we have the focus on the word camera. What we are going to do is we're going to keyframe the focus distance and enable the keyframes on all of the null layers we had. Now we're going to move to the word visuals. Once you have overlapping keyframes, what you want to do is go to the center of this and this. We're going to hit keyframe, and we're going to bring the focus distance up to the word visuals. Which one is the word visuals? And to see which word is the word visuals here, we are gonna use our third tool that I told you earlier in the video. We're gonna zoom in, move to the left, and I'm gonna click on the word visuals, which is this. I'm gonna move the focus distance right on top of the word, and as you can see now, the blurring is really minimal and negligible. So I'm gonna also keyframe the aperture, go to the beginning, keyframe it again, decrease that a bit, go further, increase the aperture so the blur is visible. And now to ease them, how is that gonna work? So we're gonna hit F9 on the keyboard. We're gonna go on the center of the null layer, on the first null layer, because that's where the peak movement speed is. As you can see, we're gonna go to the speed graph, and as you can see, that's the peak movement speed, where the peak movement speed is. So we're gonna hit F9 on these keyframes. We're gonna go to the graph editor. We're gonna make sure we are on the speed graph, and we're gonna select both these layers, and we're gonna set them accordingly. Also, if you guys wanna craft tutorial, you can let me know if you guys are interested in that and how to make different graphs and speed graphs. I can make a tutorial on that as well, so you can let me know. Right, so we have both these keyframes and their peak speed at the same time. So as you can see, the blur shifts and the focus distance shifts from the word camera to the word visuals. We're gonna do the same. We're gonna come here to the center of both these nulls. We are gonna add keyframes and make sure that our focus distance is set to the word honey. So we are gonna move back and land right on top to the word honey right there. As you can see, we are right on top of the word, and we don't really, you know what, let's adjust the aperture just slightly. Go to the keyframe editor, go to the graph editor, and go to the center of the second null layer or the graph editor, and basically set the graph. Something like this should be good. Now if you watch that back, you can see the blur shifts from each word like that. I'm just simply going to repeat these steps. I just taught you how to do typography as well, and yeah, that's how you do basic movements with the camera. And I also taught you how to change the focus from one object to another. And another basic principle of the camera is that firstly, I'll have to add some images or some assets on my timeline. So I don't know if you are familiar with this edit of mine, but as you can see, some parts of the video are moving slower than the other, and some parts of the video are moving faster than the other. And that's a really basic ground rule principle of the camera 3D, of 3D in general. And that is that the further the image away from the camera, the slower it is going to move when you pan the camera, and the closer the image is to the camera, the faster it's going to move when you pan to the left or the right. So I'm gonna show you an example. So that's a sky, as you can see. I'm gonna use that as a background, and I'm gonna send it around pretty much this far. That I think that's good. I'm gonna scale it up so it fits the canvas size. Now I'm gonna do kind of same for the background, I mean for the foreground. It's not the foreground, it's a middle ground. This is a background. I'm gonna name it background so you can understand better. So okay, these are our three objects. One's a background, one is a middle ground, and one is a foreground. We are gonna place the foreground the closest to the camera, and the middle ground, like its name suggests, in the middle. So around here should be good. We're gonna scale it up so when we move the camera it doesn't go out of frame. And we're gonna scale down the bird a bit because it's a bird, not a dragon. That should be good. I'm gonna add a null layer, enable 3D, parent the camera, and now if I start to go from left to the right, as you can see, the bird is going to the left faster than the mountain, and the clouds are, and the sky is moving really slowly. And just to explain it better, I'm gonna add motion tile to my sky so it doesn't end. And if I were to send the foreground, let's say just as much further back as the main or as the sky, it will move even faster. It will move even slower, and the bird will move even faster because the distance between these two is pretty big now. So if I move from the left to the right, you can see the middle ground is barely moving and the bird is already going out of sight, as you can see. And now if I bring it closer again, something like this, now that's pretty close to the bird. The distance is pretty close. And now if I go from the left to the right, you can see the bird is not moving as fast anymore. So that's also a really basic principle. The further back the image, the slower it's going to move, and the closer the image to the camera, the faster it's going to move. So understanding this concept is really important in order to create 3D environments. Now let's move on to something a bit more, I think I can say advanced. Maybe it's not that advanced, it's just a bit more annoying to work with. So we're gonna delete all the null layers that I had made, and I'm gonna delete the text as well, and I'm gonna add a solid or a shape layer, should I say. I'm gonna make a rectangle or a square. I'm gonna make a box. I'll make it white. I'm gonna center it up, and for this I'm gonna turn off the focus distance. And for this I'm gonna turn off the depth of field because I don't need that, and I can delete the keyframes now. So I'm gonna scale the box up a little. I'm gonna duplicate the layer and position each one of them, one to the left, one to the right, and to make sure that they are properly placed, I have OCD. I need to do that. Okay, now we are gonna talk about, as you remember, I was saying that I'm gonna tell you how to. Now we are gonna talk about how you can center a null layer if it's moved to the left or the right, because once we're adding multiple null layers, some of them may get thrown to the left, to the right. You'll get what I'm trying to say in a second. I just created a null layer, and the anchor point for this one is in the center, of course. I'm gonna hit R on the keyboard. I'm gonna rotate these layers. I want the anchor point to be in between both of these boxes, and if I try to rotate, as you can see, that's clearly not the case. That the anchor point is somewhere completely different. And to fix that, we're going to go into the second viewport to see where the anchor point is. I'm going to scale down, zoom up. Okay, so as you can see, I cannot move anywhere because this is set to left. I'm going to click on custom viewport. I'm going to move around. As you can see, that's the anchor point, or that's the, should I say, the null object, and that's the anchor point, of course. I want that to be in between both of these boxes. So what I'm gonna do for that, I am simply gonna make sure that there has been no changes made to the null layer, right? Because if I, for example, make a change and then unlink the camera to it, that change will be made to the camera, and that's irreversible unless you undo like 1,000 times and accidentally do that and you move on with the project and then you realize my camera is a bit off. That's the reason, probably. So we're gonna go back, make sure that the null layer is set to its default settings, nothing has been changed, and that's when we are gonna unlink the camera, I'm gonna center the null layer. How to do that? I think I should tell you guys how to do that now. I'm gonna tell you the shortcuts that I've been using. You wanna find this setting. It's called center anchor point in layer, and you're gonna set a shortcut that you are comfortable using. That's one. And you also wanna search up center layer in view and also set a shortcut for this one. These are the two shortcuts that I use to center layers and center the anchor point on that layer. So if I come back, as you can see, I'm hitting Control Shift A, Control Shift S on my keyboard, and it's not doing anything. It's not centering like I wanted to center it. And you may be wondering why is that? That is because I'm on the second viewport. And if you look at the viewport from the perspective that we're looking at, this is the center. So if I hit Control Shift A, Control Shift S now, according to the center of the viewport, that's where it's bringing the null layer. It's not its fault. We are selecting the wrong viewport. What we're gonna do is we're gonna select this viewport, select the null layer, Control Shift A, Control Shift S, and it's gonna bring it flat on the end of the camera, and that is where our objects are located. Let's say if that wasn't the case and our boxes were located at a different distance, and now if I were to center the anchor point and center the null layer, it would have still sent it back to the face of the camera. And to fix that, you can go to left. As you can see, these are the boxes. I'm gonna hit Y on my keyboard because that's the tool to move the anchor point around, and I'm gonna bring it right on the boxes. You can zoom in on it to see, yeah, it's not perfectly centered, but yeah, you get the point. Something like this. So now if I go to custom view 1, you can see that the null layer is left right there. But you can also move the null layer itself if you want, but that doesn't really matter because it's not linked to the camera, so it's not going to make a difference. And also the movement of the camera is solely dependent on the anchor point of the null layer, so it doesn't matter if you want to change the position of the null layer or the anchor point. It doesn't matter. The anchor point is moved to a different position. And now if I were to link my camera to the null layer, and now if I were to rotate the null layer, as you can see, since the anchor point is in between the boxes, it's gonna rotate around this axis. It's gonna orbit around the anchor point. That's why it's really important to set the anchor point accordingly and to make sure that it's in the place you want it to be. So now we've got that out the way, I'm gonna make some keyframes. Let's say I wanted to stop there. All right, I'm gonna easy ease them. I'm gonna add another null layer, and just like before, I'm gonna make sure that it starts before the first one ends. We're gonna go a couple frames forward. Once we have created another null layer, we're gonna make sure that the anchor point is still in the center or in between both of the boxes that we created. So we're gonna go into the second viewport, make sure it's 3D, and as you can see, it's all the way over there, and that's not what we want. So what we're gonna do for this, it's a bit of a different position, so going to the left would probably not work. Maybe, you know what, we can try. Yeah, as you can see, it's not ideal, but we can work with that. I'm gonna hit Y on my keyboard and make sure I'm gonna bring it backwards, try my best to center it, and let's see if that worked. We're gonna go to custom view 1, and it did kind of work, but it's still not in the center. I mean, we're gonna have to do that manually, and to make sure that we don't mess up the center and it's perfectly where we want it to be, we're gonna make sure that the second viewport is highlighted. We're gonna go to the grid option, we're gonna enable proportional grid. Okay, it's not helping it, is it? Like, wow. Okay, okay, so I'm gonna try my best to put the boxes in a place where it's easier for me to center the anchor point. We're gonna click on the null layer. We're gonna hit Y on my keyboard so I can move it and bring it to the left. Now I'm gonna center it. It's already centered in the vertical space, so I don't have to worry about that. Now if I parent the null layer, the older null layer to the newer null layer, I will be able to move it just fine. I should be able to move it just fine. So I'm gonna hit R on my keyboard, and as you can see, we are in the center and we can do whatever we want with this now. And that is how I created my animation. So that's how you set the anchor points on the null layers according to your objects or according to your items that you have on your timelines. I'm gonna break down another effect I recently saw on a YouTube short. I'm gonna explain how that's done. It's basically a orbit rotation type thing. So we're gonna create a camera layer, of course, and for now we can close that. I'm gonna make a shape layer, make it 3D, and I'm gonna make a circle. Hold down shift and center it. That can be our main circle, maybe, I guess. Now I'm gonna duplicate this, make sure it's smaller, and also I'm gonna change the color for the main circle, so I'm gonna make it something like this. All right, want to make sure it's a smaller, I'm gonna change the P position and make sure it's closer to the camera, something I think this much, I think that's enough. And I'm gonna make sure it's smaller than the main circle. Now I'm gonna create a null layer and I am going to parent, wait, this is the, okay, I'm gonna rename it to orbiting circles. I'm gonna parent the orbiting circle to the null layer and make sure that the anchor point of the null layer is in the center of our main circle. It might get a bit confusing because there's so much circles going on. Well, you have to make sure that the anchor point of our null layer is in the center of our main circle. Okay, so once we rotate it, the orbiting circle orbits around our main circle. I accidentally put it a bit too far away. I'm gonna bring it closer because it's not supposed to be that far. And now if I rotate our null layer, as you can see, it is orbiting around. And if you want this to face towards the camera all the times, we can luckily do that. There is an option for that in After Effects. We are gonna click on the orbiting circles. I'm gonna right click on it. We're gonna go to transform, auto orient. It's called orient towards camera. I'm gonna click OK, and it's gonna face our camera layer all the times. So to animate this, I'm gonna add a times expression, and I think 50, never mind, I think 100 should be good. So now we know how to orbit an object around another object. If you want, you can duplicate this multiple times and place it in different directions and make it smaller, bigger, however you want it to look like. I'm gonna make another one, make it a bit bigger. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this tutorial. I think I covered everything that came to my mind, and if I accidentally forgot something, you can comment down below. I am willing to make a part 2 if there is something that I might have forgotten. You guys can let me know, and if you have any question, you can also leave a comment for that. I reply to every single one of your guys' comment, and I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. And if you got to learn a thing or two, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time.